I realize that I'm using kind of an unfair format for this video, considering some of the shows on here will have more episodes and more material to cover than others, meaning I'll be judging some shows even more prematurely than others, but whatever, I don't care. First impressions are incredibly important. Also, go check out some of these shows for yourself if you're interested. Anyways, let's get started already. You know the deal from the title. In Dead Last, the worst anime based on its first 2 episodes is Sabito no Armor, or Rusted Armors, a show that no one is watching and will have even seen or heard of. It's not good. It's comparable to something like X-Arm, which is something that you should not strive for. It's a shame though, because I see some real potential behind the premise of this anime. It's so visually distracting that nobody will notice though. Some of the background shots in this anime honestly look pretty cool, and if the show stuck with a consistent art style like this, I could see it looking really unique and good, but unfortunately, it's just not that way. Next up is She Professed Herself the Pupil of the Wise Man. At the time of this recording, this anime had 1 episode and it was a slog to sit through. Nothing about it was good, and I actually felt pain while watching. And just in case you need some convincing, here's some of the CG. It took a while to get to the actual premise of the show, which was the main character turning into a girl, and while getting to that point, nothing of interest happens to boring characters in a boring world. And even after the premise finally happens, we have to sit through an uninteresting montage of nothing happening again, until the main character finally realized what happened. The strongest sage with the weakest crest is, in a lot of ways, worse than the other 2 shows that I've already mentioned, but I found it entertainingly bad. Based on its first 2 episodes, it's clear that the show isn't going to do anything new or interesting with the isekai formula, even though it isn't an isekai, really. I think maybe. I don't know. From the way the story is told, it shouldn't be an isekai, but the main character talks about the world as if it's a video game, using terms like experience or dungeons, etc. The lore behind the show makes no sense too. The obviously overpowered crest is declared the weakest because demons have infiltrated human society and propagated that kind of message, but why would anybody believe that hogwash? It's a stupid show with stupid things in it, and I kind of like it because I suck. Anyways, Wish Fulfillment, Simp MC, Magic Academy, I think it's safe to say that this is the most isekai, non-isekai show that I've ever seen. Next up is Futsal Boys, and okay, I gotta rant about this one. I don't watch many sports anime, so this may be a common thing in the genre, but this show is literally just Haikyuu, but worse. And a different sport. Somehow it manages to take what Haikyuu did and execute upon it in the worst ways possible. For example, the 2 most important characters based on the first 2 episodes have the exact same relationship as Kageyama and Hinata, but their conflict with each other feels incredibly forced. First of all, Kageyama Beta doesn't have any reason to not trust Hinata Beta as a teammate because he literally has a 100% accuracy rate, so he literally doesn't have any reason to not recognize him as an ally, aside from the fact that Haikyuu did it. Secondly, the first scene where Kageyama Beta is meant to be shown as a ball hog doesn't actually make me see him in that way. He's not passing the ball to you because there are people on you right now, fucking morons. Hinata and Kageyama had an endearing dynamic because their conflict was organic and the way that they grew closer was natural and fun. And here, it's just stupid. I also don't see this as a very compelling underdog story, since they already have incredibly talented players, including someone who was so good that he played for the under-18 team. What made Kurasuno a school to root for was the fact that they literally had no resources. Some of their best players stopped coming to practice. They have no schools to train with. They've never reached the heights of the glory days. And their manager, sweet and hardworking guy that he is, doesn't even know volleyball that well. And are you serious? Futsal Boys literally has the same character here. You get the picture. Futsal Boys is not good. Next up is Fantasia Sango Realm of Legends, fucking whatever. This anime is not good, and it's based off of a game, so that's probably why. I don't even really know what this anime is about. Spirits, possession. Last time I talked about possession, it didn't go so well. None of the characters are interesting or fun, and the same could be said for the rest of the show too. The only reason why it's this high is because there was some cool animation in it, but other than that, this show is just kind of bad based on its first episode. That's my cue to move on to something else because we're talking about Q. Another anime based on a game apparently, and this is a really weird one. It's about a group of girls, a very large group of girls who are trying to be voice actors but they have no experience. The large cast of characters isn't a huge problem considering we're mainly focusing on 4 characters, but the show is just boring. It's not bad, but it also doesn't do anything particularly well either. Next up is Saiyuki Reload Zeroin, and it's kind of in the same boat as Q. Apparently this anime had an old adaptation or something, so this is kind of like Brotherhood or Shaman King 2021, but I don't like either of those shows. The character interactions between the characters aren't bad, but they do get a bit repetitive, even in the span of 2 episodes. This anime also doesn't have much animation in it either, so it feels especially boring when any action does happen. I don't think the premise of the show was explained either, so I also don't really know what it's about. Next is Love of Kill. Okay, so the first episode didn't give me much to work with. It was a fine first episode, it didn't really do anything wrong, but I also don't like the main romance in this one, and I don't know if that's necessarily a flaw yet, since the main relationship has this underlying sense of creepiness and unease to it. I don't know if that's just because of how the guy looks, or if that's what the show is trying to portray, but it's too early to tell for me. Aside from that, the premise of this anime could be fun, potentially, and maybe the romance will hook me later or not, depending on what the show is trying to be, but I'm a bit neutral on this one for now. Next up is the Requiem of the Rose Queen's first 2 episodes, and this is really different from normal anime. That's probably because this was based off of a rough draft of one of Shakespeare's stories, which is pretty cool. It's about this kid who was born with a body that is neither male or female, and he's viewed as a demon's child. His only light is his father, who he thinks is the only person who loves him. The things his character goes through so far makes for interesting drama, but it hasn't had its time to fully take advantage of the events in the story yet. This show doesn't have much animation in it either, but I think that kind of works for something like this. Requiem also has a really fitting color palette, and some better character designs might have made this a visual spectacle. The second episode has some pretty awesome imagery, and the way the episode ended makes me think that this show has a lot of potential. Next, Girls Frontline, or Dolls Frontline, is another game adaptation, a mobile game, I think. It's about these robots fighting a war, specifically World War III, and I kinda like it. It was pretty fun. Episode 2 wasn't as good as the first, but it was alright. I can see this anime just being some dumb fun. Also, the opening is a real banger. Next, World's End Harem is a show that I will not talk about. Sabikui Bisco is a show that I saw before it came out, and I looked at this one character and saw that he looked like shrooms are illegal, and there's a really bad disease going around. The first episode wasn't bad, it was a solid first episode. It's just that from the advertising of the show, I figured it would be a lot faster paced and get to the point a lot quicker, but it took its time setting up the world and getting a look into the characters. It definitely ramped up towards the end, and I'm excited to see it continue, but for right now, it's just a show with a lot of potential. Next up is the Genius Prince's Guide to Raising a Nation Out of Debt, which is not just how a realist hero rebuilt the kingdom. One difference is that the main characters have incredibly different goals and personalities. This show revolves around the main character pretending to be a great king who wants to raise his nation into greatness, but in reality just wants to sell his kingdom and be rid of all of his responsibility. Honestly, based on its first 2 episodes, I can imagine myself liking the show quite a bit. It wasn't the funniest thing in the world, but it was charming, plus it has a nice art style and the main couple has some pretty good chemistry. Orient is an anime based on a manga made by the creator of Magi. The premise is pretty interesting. Societies of miners are created to be slaves for these fucking white guys. Wait, I probably shouldn't say that. And its first 2 episodes were honestly pretty good. Now, I understand that on an adaptation level, this anime is not the most impressive thing ever, but I mean, it's not the worst thing ever. Its animation is good enough to make me feel kinetic energy, the dynamics of the... It's good enough for me to like it. The 2 main characters are pretty likable with a solid friendship between them, and so far it's just a solid shonen, and I like that about it. Next anime on the list is Slow Loop. It's an enjoyable slice of life about 2 stepsisters bonding over fishing, and it's nice and wholesome. The 2 sisters have a pretty fun dynamic. There are some funny jokes. I don't know what else to say. It's really cute and you should watch it, maybe, you know, if you want. Another pretty cute anime that's out right now is The Land of Leodale, an actually pretty enjoyable isekai. In terms of production, it could use some work, but it's a nice story about a terminally ill girl forming meaningful connections with the inhabitants of a game world. In its first 2 episodes, it introduces some interesting setups and punchlines for its jokes, plus the characters are all pretty likable from the get-go. Could turn into a really fun watch. Hope you're in the mood for some comedy this season, because we've got quite a bit for you. The first one is Police in a Pod, a show about a cop who's fed up with her job, but decides not to quit because of a chance encounter with an older cop transferring to her station. The two have a pretty good dynamic going, and while it's mainly supposed to be a comedy anime, there are some really wholesome moments that make me love the characters even though I've just met them. Really seems like an anime where every character could be likable and fun, and I like that about it. The second comedy anime is Miss Koroitsu from the Monster Development Department. I initially didn't think much of this anime, you know, a monster development department making monsters to fight heroes, haha, a really evil thing in an office setting. I mean, it was kind of charming at first, and some of the jokes got a chuckle out of me, but nothing about it really hooked me. That is until I saw Lord Megistus' first interaction with the main character. He's a really wholesome character who cares deeply about his workers. Everything after that just had so much more color and life to it. The anime really steps up its comedy towards the halfway mark of the first episode, and episode 2 keeps that momentum going. It's a lot of fun. Next is Life with an Ordinary Guy who's reincarnated into a total fantasy knockout. These long-ass titles, man, I swear. Anyways, it's a fun show. It's about 2 best friends getting sucked into an isekai world, but one of them turns into a girl, and because of this change, the 2 of them start to like each other, which is fucking hilarious. I loved how they were both weirded out by their feelings and wanted to find out if the other felt the same way to prove that they weren't weird. The mind games that they tried to play on each other kind of reminded me of Kaguya-sama, Love is War, but even pettier, which is funny. Next is an anime that I really shouldn't talk about since it's not really an anime but a special that came out, but it's on my list, so whatever. So, sorry, you can read the fucking title. It's about golf and it's pretty great to be honest. It looks way better than it has any right to be. The animation and production values in general are pretty stunning to be honest. I just love how this special looks. There's some cool bits of direction too. It's only 15 minutes long, so if you just want a quick watch, you should check it out. The characters are cute and I can imagine really digging a full anime of this. Next up is Tribe 9. Apparently it's an anime based on a game that was made by the same creators as Danganronpa, and it really shows. It's rare to see an anime with this much style and visual flair to it. It looks so freaking cool. It's about this weird barbaric citywide scale version of baseball that lets you beat the shit out of other players while you're playing, and it's really fun. Unique premise, awesome visuals, and fun interactions between characters, and this show is great. In 4th place, we have Sasaki to Miyano. This show, and you might hear this comparison a lot, is like Horimiya, but BL. And it's a really freaking cute show. It's just a wholesome romance between these 2 guys. But what really caught my attention about this anime is that it has some really strong direction and visual storytelling. It also has a sense of subtlety, like it doesn't just spell things out for you and leave some things to the imagination, which could really set this apart from other romance series. Now, 3rd place goes to My Dress Up Darling. Now, this was one of the most hyped up anime coming out, and for good reason, but I probably wouldn't have put it this high just based on the first episode. It was a solid first episode, did everything that it needed to, but I just didn't like the main character that much. His whole deal is that he doesn't have any friends because he's creepy and he likes the main girl because she doesn't like it when people make fun of someone's hobbies. But he doesn't even think about how the girl feels when he starts criticizing her cosplay. I know it was unintentional, like it's supposed to be him fucking up, but he just came off as a massive hypocrite towards the end. But the second episode rectifies this mistake immediately. He starts to get super involved in her cosplaying hobbies, and you really get the sense that he cares about his new friend already. The 2 leads are fun together, and the second episode was a lot more memorable for various reasons. Anyways, moving on. Second place has got to go to Tokyo 24th Ward. This anime is an anime original from Cloverworks, and it's pretty damn good. The first episode has a bit of a slow start, but if you can make it past that, you'll find a pretty compelling narrative about 3 friends reconnecting after splitting up. There's also a really well done air of mystery to the show too. The core premise of the show is something that's right up my alley. Plus, its visuals are great, including its animation, which is shown off in a big way in the first episode's climax. And first place has to go to Akabe's Sailor Uniform, another Cloverworks original, and first of all, look at it. God fucking damn, it's good. It's a wholesome slice of life show with an overarching character arc for our main character. She wants to make friends and be more sociable because she's never really been in a real school environment, and I already like the friends that she's made so far. On top of that, Akabe is a really relatable protagonist that a lot of people will probably see a bit of themselves in. Some of the shit she does just hits way too close to home for me, to be honest. The dialogue in the show is pretty clever too. There's a lot of cool things being done with the medium here, and it's all around a great watch. I really recommend checking this one out. And that's all of them. Again, these are first impressions, and some of my opinions on these shows are definitely going to change. Thanks for watching, and hopefully there wasn't anything that I missed.